We'll wait for some folks to join us. Always love the countdown to Facebook Live. I want to make sure everybody gets everything that we're talking about today. So we'll give it just a minute and let some more folks join us. All right. Hope everybody's doing well today. I am Stacey Sprenz. I live in Durham, North Carolina. Leah McGrath, thank you, Leah, invited me to come talk about what I do, which is I take photos. I'm a photographer. I don't like saying I'm a food photographer because I do a lot more than just food. A lot of people ask me, well, if you're a food photographer, do you take photos of people? And my response is usually, do people eat food? Do people prepare food? Do people grow food? So what I do is I work as a photographer, freelance, own my own business, Stacey Sprenz Photography, and I'll put some resources, including my website, in the comments a little bit later. Bear with me. I haven't done a Facebook Live this long ever, so I know there's a lot of moving parts. Please be sure to ask questions definitely as we go. What I do is I do take photos for marketing, advertising, web, social media, that type of thing for clients, both clients that serve that hospitality, food and beverage community and agriculture community, but also I work directly with clients that have those businesses. And I like to say that I build my food, beverage, and agricultural community one photo at a time because I'm very focused on local and how I can help the local economy, the local product makers, the local restaurants, chefs, and agricultural industry, farmers, people who raise food to really market their business in a way that is genuine to their story. I like to tell their story, and I think it's really important to tell stories as you do in marketing and to really show the full depth and breadth of what you do. So my clients include restaurants, chefs, hospitality groups. I do some stuff for some hotels as well, food and beverage producers, and then anyone in the agricultural arena. That would be farmers that grow food, that raise food. And I came into doing this job through I came into doing this job through kind of a weird way. A lot of people are like, how did you get into this? And I've always taken photos, but I actually was in teaching before I did any of this. I was a person who worked within, I guess you could say, mental health prevention education, adult ed, and elementary ed in special education. And I decided at some point that that was not going to be a sustainable job for me. And I always loved cooking, loved photography, and started to kind of marry the two together probably about 6 or 7 years ago. And then about 5 years ago, I had so many people asking me, will you take photos of my products? Will you come and take photos of my restaurant? Because I was really networking within my food community. And they kind of helped me realize that maybe this is what I wanted to do for a career or a job. And so about 5 years ago, I, as they say, made it a legitimate business, and that's what I do full time now. And I work mainly with people in North Carolina. I have done a few things outside of North Carolina, Virginia. I've gone down to Texas to Rice University to teach some classes about social media photos and social media messaging to their chefs and their dining folks down there. I also do that with NC State as well. I work really close with their dietetic interns who help to promote their dining halls and what they offer within their food service. And so this was kind of a weird, like I was teaching it, I was doing it, and about 5 years ago was when I just said, I really enjoy doing this, and I like to help people tell their story, and I like to be part of a community that I think likes to nourish souls and bellies. And I find that the food people are the best people on the planet. And when I say food people, I think that means anybody who enjoys preparing, eating, growing food, and also enjoys people, having people have a very healthy relationship with food. I do tend to, as I said in my teaser on Wednesday, have a lot of friends who are dietitians. So it's been kind of very fun to work with dietitians along the way and develop those friendships and also have a way to help them. I have done some work with recently this North Carolina Sweet Potato Commission and got to shoot some recipes that a fellow dietitian friend of mine developed. So that was kind of fun. So my background obviously is in teaching, and so I do teach classes on food photography. Obviously, when we're not living in a pandemic, I teach them and do basically a hands-on classes where we set up a small studio wherever we are. Usually it's a cooking school. I've done it also for at restaurants as a way to kind of get people into the restaurant and showcase what the restaurant does. And we do like hands-on smartphone photography. You can bring your real camera, your DSLR. And so all of that kind of goes into what I did before. But teaching is not the bulk of what I do. On a given day, I can be on a farm or in a restaurant, or yesterday I was at a brewery and taking photos and then coming back and then the editing. And that's kind of the bulk of what I do, is sitting at a computer and really making that photo look amazing. So a couple of the things that we're going to talk about today, I want to give you some tips and tricks and tools because I feel like photography is one of those things that should not be a secret as to how to take really good photos of your food or your products or something that you've created. That is a really important way to tell your story, show what you do as a professional. I know many dietitians are bloggers, and that is, I think, a wonderful way to kind of share what you do, share recipes, kind of share healthy, nutritious food with the general public and also with your clients. And so we're going to talk about three kind of main components that I feel are really important. Please feel free to ask questions as we go. I generally do these types of things with visuals, but unfortunately Facebook Live will not allow me to do visuals and then for you to also see me. So I did not want to just be a voice and for you not to be able to see who I am and kind of have that, personal interaction through the screen. So we're going to talk about some things and I'm going to have you visualize some things in your mind's eye. And then obviously like the resources that I give you and my website will give you an idea of kind of afterwards of what are the things that I'm talking about. And if you haven't had a chance to check out my website, you can just Google Stacey Sprenz photography and I should pop right up. And there's a beautiful photo of a tomato salad as the kind of anchor photo for my website right now because we're in summer and tomatoes are amazing right now. So we're going to talk about light. We're going to talk about how you cannot do photography without light. We're going to talk about the focus and the message of your photo because when we talk about using photography to sell or to promote or to share food, we are trying to give a message. A photography, a photograph of a food, of something that you've made, of food, generally is going to be used to promote, to market, to share. It's also going to give people an idea of what that is going to look like, maybe prepared from a recipe. We're also going to talk about styling. I don't even know if there's such a thing, I guess, as a trained stylist. There is, I'm sure there's folks that have worked with really high-end stylists in some of the big cities that do a lot of like ad photography. The styling that I do is very simple. I do photography and styling for the most of my clients because I tend to work with smaller clients. I tend to work with clients who do not have a budget to hire me as a photographer and a food or prop stylist. So I started off food blogging about 6 years ago, and it was just original recipes that I had come up with to kind of share the bounty of the seasons, and I would style my own photos, and I kind of just took a page from, the magazines that are out there, Bon Appetit, Food and Wine, Gourmet, which, God rest its soul, is no longer, but Savour and some of those, and just looking at those and thinking, okay, I'm not going to go that deep into prop styling because obviously that's a lot of money to invest in styling materials, but what do I want to use to tell the message? And so styling and message have a lot to do with each other. They're very much interconnected. And with each section, I'm going to talk about some tools that are not expensive tools, that are tools that you can get very readily or make very readily or find very readily, even now, that will help you make better photos. And we're going to talk a little bit about editing, because I started taking photos and being a photographer when I was much younger, and there was no such thing as digital photography. I am of the mind that digital photography is a wonderful thing. We get to see immediately what we've taken. We get to know, like, did we land the photo or not? We don't have to go through 2 or 3 rolls of film and all of that developing to find out that out of 2 rolls of film, we got maybe 3 good photos. So I do love that aspect of it. I think a lot of people think that editing is cheating. It is not. Editing is the developing process of a digital photo. So editing is something where you get to kind of put your personal spin, your personal creativity on a photo that you've created. And so you can take that in many different ways, because it is a digital platform now. So you can get very creative and take a photo and almost make it into something that doesn't even look like a photo. It looks more like a graphic. You can also take a photo and do very little to it, because you've got a really good photo to start with. And that, to me, is the most important thing, that really good photo to start with in the very beginning. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So let's jump right in. I've got some notes over here because I usually have a PowerPoint to kind of keep me going. So pardon my glance down. Basically, food marketing is about getting your audience to engage with the food or the product, and them engaging with it could mean many different things. The visual aspect is what you want to say, really find the appeal of what you're doing. So the message needs to be honest. It needs to be authentic. And I think we are not in an age of food photography where we're using things like acrylic, epoxies for ice cream. And we're not, shellacking things anymore. If you look back at the food photography of like the pretty much the 80s and early 90s, there was a lot of like gluing sesame seeds on buns for the big, fast food chains. And there was a lot of, this is not real milk in the ice or in the cereal. This is not real ice cream because we don't want it to drip and we don't want it to start to melt. I think we've gotten away from that, and I think that's actually a very good thing. I think that what we see now in food photography is we see something that's genuine, that is as you will experience the food. And I think that there is a real honesty and a real, way of showing food that is the way you're going to get it. We all remember those days of the other type of food photography where it was so perfect, we could not recreate that. Or it was so perfect that when we went to the restaurant, that's never what we got. And I think that we're away from that now. We are definitely into food photography that is not fake. So we're going to talk a little bit about that when we talk about our styling. So let's talk first about light. So photography would not exist without light. Photography requires, for a nice, sharp, beautiful image, lots of light. I am in a room right now with a whole wall of windows in front of me and a whole wall of windows beside me. This is the room that I shoot in because it has such great light. Light cannot hinder your photography unless you use too much of it. And quite honestly, the more light you have, the better. Even in a very bright situation like this, if I was to take a photo with my smartphone or with my DSLR just set on automatic, I'm still not going to get the photo that I think my eyes are seeing. And I'm not going to get the brightness that my eyes are seeing. And that's because you have sensors in all of those, and the sensors are not perfect and they're not as good as our eyes. So what we have to do is we kind of have to play around with the light. We have to do things like diffuse it. We have to do things like reflect it, bend it, bounce it. So if we think about all of those things and we think about the tools that we need to use, what we want is the most light we can, but then we have to decide how we're going to light our subject. So light is on a spectrum from cool to warm. It's actually measured in K or Kelvin. And cool evokes the feeling, cool is on the left-hand side if you're looking at it. And I'm mirrored, so when I say left hand, I'm mirrored with you guys. So just think of the left-hand side is cool and the right-hand side is warm. So cool evokes feelings of modern. It evokes feelings of being in shades of blue and green. It evokes shade. And warm evokes feelings of warmth, hominess, fire, shades of orange, yellow, and red. And so when you're thinking about what kind of light you're going to shoot your food in, think about what temperature light you want. So if you want a chili, a bowl of beautiful like vegetarian chili shot, would you want to use a cool light? Well, you could use a cool light, but what's going to happen is unknowingly, until you see that photo, you're going to evoke that that chili is cold. So you want to warm that up a little bit. Maybe photograph it on something that is wood or has texture that can kind of evoke that homey warmth. If you're doing a salad, salad's going to be bright and have lots of colors and maybe have green as the background. And it's served cold, so you would want to shoot that in a more cool light. When I say warm and cool, I also mean that like when you're thinking of sunlight, like we've got coming in these windows right here, shaded areas are cool. Areas where the light is bouncing off of, say, a building or something like that, as I'm kind of looking down at the windowsill, that would be more of your warm light. Direct sunlight's never something that you want to photograph in unless you really want lots of shadows and kind of more of a dramatic look, but that is definitely going to give you a warmer look. One of the ways that you can see warm or cool in a photo is by your white balance. And most cameras and smartphones now have a way for you to do white balance as you're shooting. And I absolutely think that that's an important thing. However, if you either don't know where to find that in your camera or your smartphone doesn't have the capability to change the white balance, then what you can do is you can do that in post-production, which is your editing that you're going to do afterwards. Generally, you're going to want to find something that's black or a shade of gray or white in your photo, and that is going to be your spot that you kind of focus in on as you're going from warm to cool on a sliding scale of your editing application. If you photograph on a white plate, it's always easier to see if you've got good true color and white balance. One of the things that we notice when we photograph sometimes in restaurants is that we see that the lights above are creating a warm glow. Warm glow is wonderful for ambiance and horrible for food. So what we need in that aspect is to make sure that that white plate that that food is on does not look orange or cream colored, because you're making all of the other colors distorted. So when you think about the temperature of the light that you're photographing in, you want to think about how it's distorting the colors of the food that you're eating. The other thing that we want to think about when we think about light is how to light a subject. So a lot of people think that when you take a photo, everything has to be lit from all sides, meaning 360-degree light all the way around. That is actually not always what you want. Sometimes you might want to light from the side or from the back or from the front. So when we think about lighting a subject, think about a clock, and your subject is in the middle of that clock where the hands of the clock are actually attached to the clock. And think about your light in this way. 12 o'clock is backlight. So that is going to give you a kind of an ethereal, kind of bright, really kind of almost bright blown out look, depending on how much light you have being coming from the back. It also means that if your subject is in front of that light, you're actually blocking some of that light, so the front of your subject is not going to be as well lit. You might need to bounce that light, which means that you might need to have something on this side, on the side you are shooting from, if you're backlighting your subject, to bounce that light back. We're going to talk about some tools to do that in a minute. And basically what you're doing is that light is coming in from this window, it's bouncing off of me, and then it's projecting back at you so that you can see my face. So if you were, say, photographing a smoothie or something, and it was sitting on like a picnic table outside, and the sun or something, the light source was coming from behind it, you might want to put something reflective where you are to bounce that light back so that it will illuminate the side of the smoothie that you're actually photographing. And so you can see the color of it. You can see, you know, if there's texture in it, if there's garnish on it, that type of thing. So back to our clock. 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock are side light. You can light both sides, or you can light one side. One side is going to give you a kind of more dramatic effect. When you think about lighting something from one side, you're going to get some shadow cast on the other side that is, you know, on the other side from where your light is. You could also do light from one side and then use something reflective on the other side to bounce light back to minimize those shadows so they're not so harsh. And then 6 o'clock, where you are, is front light. So you have to think about lighting your subject in relation to where your light is coming from and also in relation to where you're shooting from. So often I tell people when we're doing our hands-on classes, put your subject down and let's, you know, if you have light that you're moving, if you have like a studio light or an LED light that you're using, move that light around the subject and you move with that or against that and see how that looks in your photos. The other thing that you can do is if you are in a window situation like this, you can move it closer, you can move it over there, or if the light is coming from one source, then you're going to move from around your subject to see if side light, back light, or front light is going to work best. So let's talk about some tools. The more light you have, the sharper image you're going to have, especially if you're using a smartphone. Those sensors are just not as developed. Even nowadays, they're better, but they're just not as developed as a digital camera, either point and shoot or single lens release. So some tools that you can use to bounce light would be foam board. I have a million sizes of white and gray colored foam board. Gray is better for if you don't want to bounce too much light. White is the best if you want to really get it, you know, bounced back. White foam board also makes an excellent backdrop if you're trying to get rid of and minimize what's behind you. If I didn't want this, you know, curtain behind me, or if I didn't want that plant behind me, I could put in a white foam board backdrop and I would just be on a white background. Cover a piece of foam board with foil because you'll see the photographer's reflectors that are those round little reflectors, and you can buy one of those, but they're kind of expensive for what they are. I have several sizes and don't use them very often. Quite honestly, I use my foam board more than I use anything. And so I have one foam board that is white, and I just use it as is. And then the other one I have covered in foil. And obviously when you cover it in foil, you're going to get that little crinkle and creases in the foil. That's actually good because that will actually help you kind of refract the light in not one kind of spotlight. That's what you want, is for that foil to be kind of wrinkly and crinkly. The other thing that you can use are LED lights or a lamp with a LED bulb or a true white bulb. You can take the shade off if you want more of a spotlight. You can keep the shade on if you want it diffused. When you diffuse light, you're basically taking a light that is a pretty bright source and you're basically putting something in front of it that is translucent so that you're breaking up those light beams so that the light spreads out and it doesn't pinpoint on your subject. So in order to do that without having to buy heavy duty photographer diffusers, what I suggest is vellum. You can get it at like a Michael's craft store, or in a big pinch, wax paper works really well. I have taken a window that didn't have a shade on it and put wax paper in front of it just to kind of dampen down that light. I wanted the light, I don't want to block it, but I want to diffuse it to give a little bit more you know, brightness, but not spotlighting. And the other thing that you can use is a white poster board, and that will help you bend the light. So when I say bend light, when you bounce or reflect it, you're basically taking the light and it's coming in an angle and it's going straight back. When you bend it, you're covering the entire thing. And so you can arc that poster board around it and help light it from more than one side. So any questions on that? on light, we have to talk a lot about light. It's the bulk of what I talk about because you can't get a good photo without a lot of light. So let's talk a minute about message and focus. So when you set up your frame, you want to consider who's the hero of your shot. We use the term hero, which I kind of like, and your hero could be something like a product placement. So I've done some shots for a pasta sauce company, and we had a beautiful like lasagna or ratatouille that was in a beautiful casserole dish, and it was not the hero of my shot. It was there in the shot to give an idea that this is something you can make with this product, but the hero of my shot was the actual product. And so I kind of placed the lasagna at an angle, and then it was in the foreground, which was closer to my camera, but I went beyond that with my focus, so that was nice and soft, but you could still see that it was something baked with pasta sauce, and my focus went to the product. So your hero is generally going to be the focus, both in your camera and on your, in your message of your photo. And you also want to think about the emotion or the message that you're sending. Bright colors generally talk people through health and fun. Warmth is home cooked, hot foods. Coolness is cold foods or a modern kind of more sterile environment. Ingredients. When you show the ingredients around your finished item or around your product, what you're showing is all of these items make this thing. The thing is your hero, but those ingredients give it sense of place, and it also gives it message. A flat lay is when you photograph something completely parallel above. And what you're doing in your flat lay is you are kind of, you're showing, it's harder to do a hero in a flat lay unless it's in the middle of the frame. But what you're doing is you're kind of showing everything that, either a tablescape or everything that goes into that. There are some foods and dishes that are more difficult to shoot or that give you trouble, and those would be things that don't have a lot of color in them or a lot of texture in them. So often what I say, and we'll get to that in styling in just a second, is that you're going to want to add texture or color in your styling because you're going to want everything not to be brown. If you're doing meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and green beans, and those green beans are nice and bright, but they're the only thing on there that is nice and bright, what you're going to want to do is add some texture and some color with the way that you style. And you can do that with fabrics. You can do that with, a pitcher in the background next to, a glass of water or lemonade, or you can do that with some flowers because it's a tablescape, that type of thing. Always add a human element if you can. I think people, when they look at food photos and they look at recipes, they want to see themselves there. And so when you can add that human element, what you're adding is an opportunity for people to say, oh, I see me there. You also want to consider, gender, ethnicity, generation, all of that, because that's all in the messaging of your photo. So let's talk a little bit about how to, help with the message. You can use brightly colored backgrounds. I use, either poster boards, or you can go to Michael's and get the rolls of paper that they use for bulletin boards. Sometimes that bright pop of color kind of helps send a message. Editing apps and software to help you accentuate the hero or whatever, your product is that you're trying to promote. Those will help you kind of make sure that that is nice and sharp and in focus and really brightly colored so that the eye goes to that instead of just the whole thing, because your eye goes through a frame based on how you frame it. So let's talk about styling. So we'll spend the rest of the time talking a little bit about styling and some of the tools. So styling is about setting the emotion and the message, but you can style in many different ways. You can use food as ingredient. You can use food as a accent. You can also use all kinds of styling props. Models are styling props. A hand reaching into something as a styling prop. Spoons, utensils, little vessels that make sense with, like a garnish for something. Always try to add a sense of balance and a sense of color and texture with your styling, whether you're using food or whether you're using actual styling props. It makes the food relatable. It gives a sense of place. If we photograph something on a white background or just on a table and there's no utensils with it and it's a salad, does it really make sense? When you show the utensils with it, or a napkin kind of nicely, bundled up there, or a steak with a good steak knife and a fork kind of placed on the plate, those things will give a sense of place and it will make the item that you're doing relatable. It also gives meaning to the message. Most styling is simple and it has to make sense. We do not have to put parsley or mint on everything as our pop of green. Please, please know that. It has to make sense. If cilantro would go with something, put some sprigs of cilantro in the background, or chop up some cilantro and put it in a little vessel. Sprinkle a few on there, or put it there as a side of like, hey, this is something that you could do with that. Always consider who the hero is when you're styling. Place your styling items before you place your food, especially if it's food that is going to diminish quickly, like ice cream or something that's hot, or a soup that's going to kind of skim over on the top. Always get that all set up so that you know that all you got to do is place that food and grab that photo. When you think about styling, add balance so that your photo makes sense. If you're going to be adding a graphic overlay later, make sure that you leave space for that in your frame, but that everything else is balanced, and then that graphic overlay up there in the corner, or the recipe that's going to be in the corner, is going to make sense for what you're doing with the photo afterwards, that it will all balance. Let's talk about some tools for styling. Tools for styling, that list can be extremely long. Here's what I use. I use fabric scraps for napkins. I go to Joann's, or I go to Michael's and get the fat quarters for the quilting, and they make excellent little napkins or little pops of color for, a runner or a placemat. The end bolts are also very good at Joann Fabric. Interesting utensils, wood, antiques. Antique stores are my favorite thing because you can add a really cool element if you pop in like a cool antique pie server, if you're doing a pie or a cake or something like that. Placemats, wooden cutting boards, tiles or other surfaces that you can find at Lowe's or Home Depot. That is one of the best places to get backgrounds. Get a nice size board and get the, wooden barn linoleum tiles that have the sticky backing. And then you've got a board that you can use that looks like a beautiful farm table without having to have a beautiful farm table. Food props, I use a lot of herbs, spices, that type of thing. Or I will do like a bowl of whatever, fruit or vegetable is in that item. When I shot the pasta sauce, I would always have some beautiful Roma tomatoes and a couple heads of garlic and maybe a few sprigs of basil. And those would be kind of soft in the background as just a nod to the ingredients that were in the product or in the recipe. The other things that I use are a can of air or a little puffer, and that helps you get crumbs out of the way so you don't have to edit those out later. Always get them out of the way. Don't say, oh, I'll just edit those out later because it takes so much longer. Trust me, I know, because I still struggle with that. A pastry brush to brush something, to smooth something out, or to get little crumbs out of the way as well. A damp paper towel to wipe up the edge of plates for the smears and drips. A spray bottle with water or oil to mist vegetables. They always look a little bit cooler when they have that little texture of the droplets of water on them, like they've been freshly washed. And some good food or otherwise tweezers, because sometimes you're going to just need to place things. I also sometimes will use a little bowl of water. So if I'm doing something like a chili or like a, say like a corn chowder, I am getting pieces of that or saving pieces of that out. So I use the bowl of water to rinse them off and then place them in there so that you can see the beans, because sometimes when you ladle things in, you can't see the beans or the corn. Sometimes I'll leave a few out of the recipe and then put a few on top, push them in ever so lightly, or take a little brush and brush some of the soup on it so that it looks like it's part of the soup, like it hasn't been placed on there, but you can still see that it's got big chunks of corn in it, so that someone is looking at that and thinking, do I want to make that recipe? Do I want to enjoy that? They know that that is what their experience with that recipe is going to be. Few resources. Editing, I love, and I will put these resources in the comments as soon as we're done here. editing, I love Lightroom for digital camera, DSLR camera stuff. I also love PicMonkey. PicMonkey is a wonderful online platform for editing any kind of photo and also adding graphics. I think it's really a blogger or somebody who wants to do their own business stuff. I think that's one of the best ones out there. As far as education for like taking better photos and understanding photography better, Creative Live is wonderful. They have wonderful classes on there for styling and food photography and all kinds of things. Playing with light, that type of thing, if you want to get into one technique specifically. Digital Photography School is excellent, everything from smartphones to point and shoot cameras to DSLRs. And Contrastly, which is another one. I get my ideas basically by looking on things like Instagram. If you go to hashtag food photographer, food photography, hashtag product photography, you can, the sky is the limit as far as ideas on how to shoot something. And Pinterest is wonderful too. I do private Pinterest boards with my clients sometimes so that I know what they mean when they say, I want it to be bright, I want it to be healthy. So we know that we are kind of looking at the same type of messaging with our photography. So I don't want to go too much past now because I know you guys probably have a busy Friday or are ready to get on with the weekend. So once again, I want to thank Leah. Thank you so much, Leah. Sorry about the clicking microphone. I know my microphone on my laptop was not the best, so I thought this would be a good one to use. Hope you guys heard me okay. And like I said, I'm going to add some comments to this to give you some resources, and really appreciate your time. Don't hesitate to reach out through social media or my website if you have any questions or if I can answer anything specific to any photos and stuff that you're doing. And once again, thank you so much for having me here today. And yes, I will put yes, Michelle, I will provide the names of the apps and the sites after the Facebook Live. I'll add them to the comments of the video so that you guys can have all of that. And I'll add the link so that all you got to do is click on the link. I just didn't want to do that during this because that feels very odd to be in there. So hope that this was helpful for you guys. And again, I'm really honored to be here and talk about what I do. I wish there was a way for me to actually do a shoot on Facebook Live and like show you hands-on, but hopefully you guys can practice at home, practice in your offices, and come up with some good stuff. And don't forget to tag me in anything that you take so I can like it. I love to look at beautiful food photos. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it so much. Bye.